All right. We are ending the Thanksgiving week with markets going lower. We are going to discuss brand new projections about the soybean crop and soybean exports in Brazil and the weather in the United States. Right here with GIdel on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, let's start with the markets. Some of them going down this Friday after the Thanksgiving holiday in the United States.
Yes, yeah. Well, it turned up we had a little enthusiasm right in the opening, but things kind of wandered lower as the day went on here, from the standpoint that the general trend here has been pretty lackluster. Export activity has been quiet, and in general here after the after the extension of the Black Sea food corridor at the end of last week. Oh, the tension's off, no big deal. Things are going to happen there. Interestingly enough, the actual shipments coming out through the food corridor this week have been pretty modest at the best, you'd have to say, and maybe somewhat disappointing. But I think it has to do with the fact that people going sending ships in, and the Ukrainians trying to figure out what was going to happen there, despite the fact that the Russians had made some indications they were going to extend things. Yeah, they're pretty cautious about whatever Moscow has to say on things until it actually happens. And so I think that's part of the reason why, which in its own way is probably positive around the world here for the less things coming out this week in the food corridor. But in general, it has been a factor here in things. Interestingly enough, probably the biggest news here at the end of the week, we had some very good weekly exports. Now, some of that we should have expected from the standpoint that the Mexicans, during the conversation from the Mexican president here 10 days or so ago, there was some very significant purchases going on the in the U.S. markets here. They bought 1.2 to 1.3 old crop and about 600,000 tons of new crop corn, and that I think that's really the actual cattle feed yards there in northern Mexico that says, well, that's a good concept, buddy, but it costs us a lot of money to find things that are non-GMO, and at this point, maybe we should buy a few to get a little ahead of schedule. But the last few days here, there has been indications from the Mexican uh, administration. I'm not sure he said the things. It could have been the ag minister saying things. Are we being thought out there and all that? But the numbers were good, and there actually was some additional corn that was purchased up to 1.8 or 72 million bushels for old crop. Beans were solid on things here, and wheat at 18.8 million were also good. But that prompted us a little enthusiasm. But in general, here, the lack of competitiveness of the U.S. wheat market and overall here, and the idea that the food corridor is going to be generally back up and running for most of this winter didn't help the wheat market. And this actually was one of the poorer closes we've had in wheat in months, maybe since last summer, slipping down and closing below $8 on the nearby December on that. Corn also held in here because of the purchase you mentioned. Beans kind of lackluster here on the day after Thanksgiving.
Yes, and before jumping into the corn markets, looking forward and looking into the soybean markets, we have to talk about South America. Argentina is coming back again with incentives to export soybeans for the coming month. And there is a brand new forecast for the Brazilian production with a record of 155 million metric tons by Safras Mercado, and for the exports, 15 million metric tons more than the previous year.
Yes, yes. Safras Mercado has really been one of the more aggressive ones down there, optimistically about the coming year for output at this point. Interestingly enough, uh, the this year's planning progress has been somewhat 8 to 10% behind the previous year, but in general, there's been pretty good moisture uh, going around. But there's been some dry spots. We're not actually below some of the moisture we had a year ago on a percentage basis, and the rains that we had in Argentina earlier this week, last weekend, I should have to say, finally kind of moved up into Brazil, and most of it happened to be in the northeast provinces that kind of missed most of. There was Goiás and Mato Grosso, so things are still a little bit on the interesting scenario, but there's some reason to be optimistic. I wonder how strong they will be there, and probably the other real twist in this, and you kind of threw it out here, was these what I call the soybean dollar encouragement here from the Argentine government. That like they are really looking for tax revenue here at this point, and what that does, though, it does in general, it impacts their soybean crushing industry, which has been really the backbone of the things they wanted to do over the years on selling meal and oil and getting that income into the versus just selling the beans. So that's going to be an interesting twist here. That's been rumored for about a week, and now there seems to be a strong indication they're going to have a 200 to probably $215 um, ratio here on soybean sales being offered out next week. So that's probably another reason why the soybeans kind of faded here as the day went on after the excitement of the exports that we had this morning.
Yeah, so on the corn side of things, as you mentioned before, there was more demand from Mexico in the previous week.
Oh, yeah. There was some other purchases just came in other than the Mexican purchase, and that boosted it up another 600,000 or thereabouts on the old crop. In general, here, corn though has really had a difficult time this year because of the high dollar relationships and competitiveness around the world. Uh, it's kind of surprising. There's really not going to be much competition. Doesn't look like from Argentina for quite some time. I know that. They had a so-so crop last year, and they haven't been able to get this year's crop planted. They're only about 23-25%. I think I saw a data on that, which traditionally there's somewhere between 30 and 35. But last year's situation, when they delayed planting them until after they got done with their soybeans and wheat harvest and all that stuff, in January and February, it turned out that there's more moisture around, and they had some better than they expected kind of early ideas on corn output. The soybean plantings also are delayed on things, and that's going to make things interesting on their output on competition from South America. Brazil, as we've just mentioned, has been moving along, and lots of optimism there. Not as much in Argentina at this point, and we'll have to see if the world uh, grabs a hold of it or not. Right now, the impact of South America's soybean sales are kind of waning just because of what's going on here with the seasonality of shipments from Brazil, and then there should be some scenarios there to um, help the U.S. on some actual shipments. We've had some real good sales along the way here. We need to see if we can get the shipments going too on the soybeans here in the U.S. we have a window till now until mid to late January at least before we get another big batch of Brazilian beans being available to be sold.
And starting next week, I think we are starting to look forward for the coming year.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a that's always a factor this time of year, and the right now at least the upcoming December crop report on the 9th is still well, it's just about 2 weeks away, I guess, right now, and it turns up that that particular crop report in the U.S. does not have any new U.S. production numbers. It just has an supply demand updates and some world number scenarios. Doesn't have any updates now on U.S. production until the January final, which I'm estimating is like January 12th. Haven't really seen a specific date on that yet, but it's usually right around that time. And that, the upcoming December USDA report probably will have some impact. There's been a lot of people worried about U.S. exports, and there's no doubt that the export sales on corn has been behind. That's probably the one to me that is the only one that potentially could still see some adjustment downward. The wheat numbers slightly behind, but not dramatically behind, and the soybean numbers on actual sales are hanging in there to get to the USDA's numbers. So the export number on corn could be 50 or 75 million less yet, but that's the only one I see that or anticipate that the USDA is going to be looking at it very strongly going forward. But that things can always change between now and the 9th of December.
Yeah, and on the macroeconomic side, we are still expecting a new rate hike from the Federal Reserve, but not as high as expected before.
Yes, I think there's the expectation is back to half a percent or 50 basis points instead of the previous 75s we've seen. And that really is the impact on that type of impact on the agriculture is twofold. It's on the strength of the U.S. dollar, which has been actually a little sluggish this last few days here, and that hasn't been as strong as it was earlier. And that, but still, the U.S. dollar relationships now, comparison to historic levels, being not at all-time highs, but definitely is very strong. Still is a factor. The other twist of it is, and there was just some commentary that came out this the last day or so, and that is people in the U.S. are and the farmers are going to their accountants here and say, "Oh, well, look at this! My borrowing money for putting corn and soybeans inputs out there to for the 2023 crop are going to be a lot higher now." There, to me, they're historically pretty cheap comparison to what they were in the 80s, late 70s through the mid 80s, up even up to the 90s here on farm loan rates, but they are definitely higher than they have been the last few years, and they're being noticeable on things as we go forward. Right now, I'm not sure there's going to be a big impact on what people and farmers might do here on planning for the 2023 year, but it's being noted out there. Actually, one of the things that I think impacted this last year's corn plantings, and maybe even the reason why some people went and took advantage of the planning or not planning and getting their prevent planning payments was the fact that the cost of operations were higher and that. But right now, there's still a lot of people wanting to project 92 million up 3 million or more for the U.S. corn plantings for because of the fact that really even today in my hometown, there was a chance to sell some corn out there just near $7, which is a very, very impressive number for this time of year.
All right, let's see. Thank you very much, Jerry.
It's always good to talk, and we will see what late November and December has to say next week.